Hey everyone, my name is Ruby. I am the community hero here at CareerFoundry, serving all of your community needs. I also rescue kittens and trees in the Berlin area. So we're really excited to have you join our webinar today on how to be a UI designer. Good evening to everyone in Berlin. Good morning to everyone in the States. Good day to everyone else, and good day if you're in Australia. We don't want to leave anyone out. So what we're going to do here, I just first want to make sure if everyone can hear me. If you can't hear me, you can send some questions through in the Q&A section and just let me know. And I'll sort it out for you. But hopefully it should be all good. We'll be answering your questions during the Q&A. Our lovely host Eric will be doing that. So I want to introduce you in a moment to our very special guest speaker, Eric. First, I'll run through, so between each segment, there'll be 3 segments. We'll be doing about 5 minutes of Q&A, and Eric will be answering your questions then. And you may have heard the teaser, but at the end, we'll be offering a little gift for everyone that's stuck around, so make sure you stay tuned for that. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce to you our special guest, UI designer, professional, and our CareerFoundry course creator, Eric Bielos. So I'm just going to make sure you can see Eric. Can everyone see Eric right now?
Yeah, can you guys hear me all right?
Cool.
Awesome. Cool. Well, let's kick this thing off. So appreciate the warm intro. Really happy to be here. Thanks a lot for taking time to jump in on this webinar and taking some time to hear what we've got to say about UI design, how to be a UI designer, and how we can help you do that here at CareerFoundry. So first off, I want to tell you guys that first off, the first step is just showing up, and you guys have already done that, so congratulations on that. This is the first step to a complete change in your career path, so that is absolutely awesome, and I'm super excited to be here and super excited that you guys are here with me. So first thing I'm going to do is, let me just pop on. I got a little presentation for you guys, and just make sure you'll have to let me know that you guys can all see it. All right, so I'm going to assume everything is good, and if it's not, you guys can just let me know in the little QA section here. So first thing I want to do, let's get right into this thing. First thing I want to do is just kind of give you guys a little bit of background about me and talk a little bit about my journey as a UI designer. So I started using computers back in like 1998, and I started to get really obsessed with the internet and figuring out how it all worked. And I had my first computer came with a copy of Photoshop 5, and Photoshop 5 is a really popular tool for creating UI design and for graphic design in general. So I pulled it up. I would spend a lot of time playing around in it, and I eventually realized that I wanted to be a graphic designer. I wanted to make all this stuff that I was interacting with on the internet. So I decided I'd go get a degree in graphic design. And fast forward 2 years later and about $20,000 worth of debt later, I have my degree in graphic design. I enter into the job market, and things are going smoothly. But then in around 2006, something really interesting happened. The iPhone was released. And it really completely changed the way that I saw design, especially user interface design. It had so many new and unique interactions, and I really didn't know that user interface could be like that. It could be that unique and that fun and that innovative. So from that point, I was like, you know what, this is what I want to do. I want to build these user interfaces, and I want people to use them and feel the same delight that I'm feeling. So what I did was I was working at a multimedia firm at that time, and I tried to kind of learn UI design on my own. But I had a really hard time figuring out how to become a great designer. I didn't really have proper mentors to bounce any of my designs off of, or people to answer my questions. Startups coming out of there, they were doing really interesting work. And that's where I was, from what I could tell, that's where all the talent was. That's where all the really good designers were going. So I thought, well, that's where I need to go. So, you know, we got out, my wife and I decided, and I got a job with a startup right off the bat, and this is where everything kind of changed for me. This is when I figured out what it was to really become a real UI designer. And the reason for this was because I was dropped right in the middle of it, working with people who were a lot smarter than me and a lot better designers than I was. And these were people I could bounce my ideas off of, people I could learn from every single day. And the reality is, you want to be the stupidest person on your team, because that means you're learning. And when you're the smartest person on your team, that's when you usually want to get the heck out of there and find a new job. So that's a little bit about my journey. So I kind of have been working for a lot of companies since then. I decided to start my own company, and my main role in that is kind of doing the UI design, and I also do a lot of UI design freelance and stuff like that. So that's kind of been my journey as a UI UX designer. Right now, what I want to talk about is kind of the difference between the two of those. You've probably heard about user interface design, you've heard about user experience design, but a lot of times these two concepts are just kind of lumped together. A lot of times people will hire, they'll say, we're looking for a UI UX designer. And you can see why this is, because for a long time, the user interface and the user experience of an app really wasn't that important next to like the code, the coding aspect of it. But nowadays, far more emphasis is being placed on design. So, and these roles really are fundamentally different, and people are kind of realizing that. So nowadays they'll often be separated out, and I'm a big advocate for that, because they really are two completely different roles. I think that the reason they get kind of lumped together is because there is a little bit of overlap there, and I'm going to get a little bit into that right now. So first off, what is user experience? I like to start off with UX because it's kind of the overarching umbrella for UI and UX and interface design. So UX is basically what determines success for a user. That's the job of the UX designer. They want to figure out, how does a user get from A to B in your software or your app and feel successful, feel like they accomplished whatever goal they were trying to accomplish. The UX designer is going to, the way that they do this is they spend a lot of time building flowcharts and wireframes, and they'll conduct a lot of user research and a lot of user testing. And actually nowadays, a lot of times user research will be separated out into its own field. So you'll have a user experience researcher that works with the user experience designer. And that's because you really need someone putting 100% of their attention on figuring out what it is that the users want. So that is basically the job of a UX designer. They figure out what determines success for the user, and then they build it. With UI design, it's a little bit different. UI designers are the people who bring the user experience to life. And the way they do this is they'll take flowcharts and mockups from the UX designers, and they'll convert those into the beautiful interfaces that we get to use every day. And then from there, they get handed off to the coder, and that's kind of the software life cycle to build a piece of software. But so if you use, like, think of the last app you used, or if you're on a PC or on a Mac right now, all of the little buttons that you click and the menus that drop down, these were all actually physically created by a UI designer in a program like Photoshop or like Sketch, which I'm going to talk about a little bit later. So this is what a UI designer does with a lot of their time. They'll spend the day working in the software, pushing pixels around, and actually designing what it is that the user sees. And back to this overlap, the reason that this overlap is there is because sometimes as a UI designer, you will be spending time creating wireframes and conducting user research, and that's why at CareerFoundry, we actually, when you're learning user interface, we actually also teach you a good chunk of user experience design, and that's so that you know how to build wireframes and build flowcharts, and you're going to know how to communicate with UX designers, because in some ways they have a whole language of their own, and you're going to need to be able to speak to them on a daily basis. So I kind of mentioned some of the tools that UI designers use, and I'd like to get a little bit deeper into that now. Excuse me. So Photoshop, you've probably heard of. It's very popular software. You've heard the concept of photoshopping something. And that really is what Photoshop is meant for. It's meant for manipulating photos. But over the years, it's really evolved, and it really does a lot of stuff now. I mentioned that I started back when they were on version 5, back in 1998, and it really was the best program for creating UI design at the time. And that's because it just does so much stuff. Whether you're wanting to do some basic animation, or if you're wanting to manipulate photos, or if you're wanting to actually do user interface design, you can do all this stuff with Photoshop. And I think that's why a lot of UI designers have been using it over the years. But the reality is it's not meant for UI designers. So I mentioned this greater emphasis that's been being put on design just as a culture. And I think that's what's kind of like given way to programs like Sketch. Sketch is a tool that's specifically built for user interface designers like myself. And I switched to Sketch about 2 years ago, and it's a night and day difference between working in Photoshop. I worked in Photoshop for probably a decade before I switched over to Sketch. So it was like I knew it like the back of my hand. But when I went to Sketch, I never even looked back, because Sketch doesn't have all these extra bells and whistles. It just has what you need to create great interface design. And it's a very simple program. It's very well made, and that's why we focus on that program here at CareerFoundry. And it's actually becoming extremely popular for UI designers. So even at companies like Twitter, Facebook, Google, they're all starting to use Sketch, whereas back in the day they would have used Photoshop. So it's a very popular tool. There are also some other tools that are probably worth mentioning, and as your journey progresses as a UI designer, you're going to become more and more familiar with all of these tools. So a few of these tools are GIMP is an open source kind of version of Photoshop. It's a free open source version that it's a bit different, but it does a lot of the same stuff that Photoshop does. So that's definitely an option, and it's a fun program to mess around with and do photo manipulation, but it's not really, just like Photoshop, it's not really built for UI design. Illustrator is another program that's by Adobe. Adobe also makes Photoshop. Illustrator does a lot of the same stuff as Photoshop, but its emphasis is specifically on illustration. So people who are animators and people who draw a lot, they can use Illustrator to kind of bring their drawings to life, and it's really good for that kind of stuff. And you're going to learn a bit more about this stuff in the course at CareerFoundry. And that's what I want to talk about a bit now. So here at CareerFoundry, our focus and methodology, basically, we don't want you to have to go through all the stuff I had to go through to try to learn UI design. One thing we focus on is allowing you to go at your own pace. So you can do 3 months or 6 months, part-time or full-time. This way you can kind of work the course into your daily life. So you don't have to drop everything to learn this new skill, which is what I had to do when I went to full-time classes to earn my degree. It's also a mentored course, and I've kind of mentioned how important that was for me to find a mentor. So what we do is, from day one, when you start the UI design course at CareerFoundry, we're going to match you with a mentor, and this is really the key to the program, because this is the person that is always there for you, someone who can always answer your questions, and someone who can ultimately help you figure out your way in the job market. They're basically the person who answers whenever you get stuck. They're the people you can rely on, and that is absolutely hugely important when you're trying to learn this new skill. So what's in it for you at this course? Well, number one, there's no hefty tuition. I had to pay $20,000 or $30,000 when my degree was said and done, and it's taken me forever to have to pay that off. And a lot of people are in that exact same situation. And no one needs to be stuck with these giant bills to learn this new skill. And the way that we do this is we make sure that you have a very well-rounded understanding of UI design when you leave this course. We focus specifically on the design principles, what it takes to be a great UI designer. You're going to be doing wireframes, mock-ups, flowcharts. You're actually going to be in the software from day one, figuring out how to use it, and ultimately you're going to leave this course with a well-rounded portfolio, and that really is going to be your key to entering the job market, is having something to show for the time that you've put into this course, something that's going to be your wedge into the job market when it's all said and done. So that's our first section, and right now I just wanted to see if you guys had any questions for me, or if I can elaborate on any of these points I've kind of been talking about. I see one question about, can you use Sketch for Windows? Sketch is a Mac-only program. Now, I'm not sure if they have plans to expand to Windows or not, but that is one of the give and takes about using Sketch. They kind of are like firmly just sticking to Mac because it's just an easier platform to design for, easier to distribute the software. You're not going to be, we focus specifically, sorry, the question here is, will we be learning Photoshop, GIMP, and Illustrator in the UI design course? We mentioned Photoshop a little bit, but we focus specifically on Sketch because Sketch is becoming kind of the industry leader in UI design. There are also some other programs that are coming out because right now it's kind of, everyone's realizing that there's kind of a gap in this market, right? Photoshop isn't really doing what UI designers need. So Sketch is doing a really good job of filling that gap. There's also an app called, I think it's called Comet, that Adobe is working on. Adobe is the company that makes Illustrator and Photoshop. So they're working on an app, I think it's called Comet, and it's actually geared more towards user experience designers. But there's a lot of overlap in those two programs. Okay, cool. I don't see too many other questions coming in, so if you guys have any questions that pop into your head, you can just write them down, and we'll have more Q&As after the next sections and at the end of the course. And of course, I'm always reachable by email. So, all right. So next, what I want to do is just kind of give you guys a little demo, show you what it's like to actually work as a UI designer, what kind of work they do throughout the day. So I have Sketch open here. And I've just kind of like put a little thing together, and I'm just going to walk you through what I'm going to be doing here. So I've had this idea for kind of a language learning mobile app. And the idea, just the high level of it, is that, and let me know, let me know if you guys can't see my screen right now, but I think I'm sharing it properly. But the high level of this idea is that when you're learning a language, it's really hard to build your vocabulary and to find time to do that. So this app will basically send a new word to you via a push notification every single day, and it'll give you the definition, and you can click and view like expanded info on that word. And the goal is to just kind of like be this supplementary source for you to build your vocabulary while you're learning a new language. So I have a quick little sketch that I threw together for this app. Right now I'm actually traveling around the country, and I don't have my UI sketchbook with me at the moment. So I just grabbed a piece of paper and threw this sketch together, and this is perfectly fine. As a UI designer, some designers will only work with a Post-it and a Sharpie, just because they don't want to put too much effort into the mock-up. They just want to get what they need down on paper and then move into Sketch or into Photoshop. So it's perfectly fine to just write it down on a napkin or on a Post-it or whatever you have available. So at a high level, I drew a quick little flowchart here at the top. The main screens of the app are the home screen, where you can basically select which lessons you want to purchase or that you want to say this is the active lesson. Once you click that, you'll have your lesson screen, which will show as you learn the new words, they will appear here, and you can always go back to this to review the lesson. You can click one of these words, and that will take you into an expanded view that gives you a picture for the word, gives you the definition, and then within there's going to be a link to the conjugation and a link to more reading that would probably go to like about.com or something like that. So I have my little sketch right here, and I'm just going to go through this from top to bottom and start putting some stuff together. And it's okay if a little bit of this is unclear. We don't really have the time to go too much into Sketch, but in the UI design course, we go into all the different aspects of this program that I'm using. So you'll definitely know it by the back of your hand by the time you're done with the course. So the first thing I'm going to do, I have kind of a little section up here where I want to show the progress that you're making through this lesson. And I've got some kind of rough pixel counts over here. So I want this to be about 587 pixels high. So I'm just going to put that in the inspector here. And I kind of want sort of an image, like a nice eye candy image for the background of this top area. So what I'm going to do is I've got some images already picked out. This first section I want to do is for transportation. So it's words about transportation and getting around. So I've got a little picture of kind of a busy street in London here. I'll grab this, put it up to the top, make sure that it matches the height of this rectangle that I made, so it's 587. All right, then I'll use my little align operators here in the top right to make sure it's nice and centered. So I'm going to be putting text on top of this image, so I need to make it a little bit darker. So what I'm going to do is, in my layers palette here, I'm just going to move that rectangle on top of this image. I'm going to turn it black. Then I'm going to adjust my opacity where it's a bit translucent, and I'm going to put it down to about 60%. So this way it gives you some nice, non-distracting kind of eye candy in the background, and I can start to put some stuff on top of that. And I'm going to make sure to always keep all this stuff grouped so it's nice and organized. And next up, I have this cool little circular progress indicator, and I'm going to kind of walk you through how I'm going to build that. So when you're doing UI design, pretty much everything can be broken down into basic shapes. So this basic shape is a circle. So I'm going to start with a circle. I'm going to keep it gray. Then I'm going to hit Command D on a Mac, and I'm going to duplicate that circle. Then I'll grab the little handles, bring it in just a little bit, and I'm going to turn this one white so you can see it. So now all I have is a circle sitting on top of a circle. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight both of these so I have them both selected. Then I'm going to go to my Boolean operators here at the top, hit subtract, and voila, now I have this nice, I'm going to turn it white, I have this nice white circle. So I'm getting there. You can see it's kind of turning into what I've kind of sketched out here. So now I want to kind of fill up part of the circle to indicate your progress through the lesson. So what I'm going to do is just start with just a rectangle. Again, it's always just kind of basic shapes. You'd be surprised what you can do with just triangles, rectangles, and circles in Sketch. So I'm going to turn this a nice bright green. And all I'm going to do is grab this, and then I'm going to make it to where the green only shows where it overlaps with the circle. And I'm going to do that by creating a mask. So now these two are masked together, and that basically tells Sketch that only show the green where it overlaps with the white circle behind it. So now I've got a nice little progress indicator there. You can also see that there's a bit of a little triangular kind of cutout here where it kind of says like the actual number of how many words you've learned. So what I'm going to do is, again, I'm going to start with a basic shape, a triangle. I'm going to draw a little triangle kind of in about the size that it looks to be on my sketch here. And all I'm going to do, and it's going to get a little unorganized here for a second, but all I'm going to do is subtract this triangle again, just like that. So now all I've done is worked with these basic two circles, a triangle, and a rectangle, and I've made this nice, really interesting progress bar. And I've got these all already in a folder, so I'm going to name those just to make sure I'm staying organized. And now let's keep going here. So I'm going to put just kind of like a number representation of how far I've went through this particular lesson. Get the sizing nice and right there. And one thing I want to do is so the background image kind of represents transportation, which is what this particular mocked-up lesson is about, but I also want a little pictogram that's going to represent that. So I picked out this bicycle from a free icon font online. It's called Font Awesome if you want to check it out. And we actually get deep into these icon fonts in the UI design course so you can learn how to use those. So now I have my nice little pictogram that can represent this lesson all throughout my app. All right, so it's starting to come together here. So let's move on a bit. I also want to just kind of make sure it's really clear what lesson they're on. So we'll just have a big title that says transportation. Again, we'll use my aligning tools up here to make sure it's nice and centered. Another thing I'm going to do, I want to move this whole unit up. So what I'm going to do is just grab the circle, grab the bike, and grab the numbers here. Hit Command G, which puts them into a group. Call it progress indicator. Now I can grab this whole thing just by clicking this in this group in the layers palette, and I can move the whole thing up. All right, so there you go. So our top part's coming together. Let's see if we can move on a bit. So what I went down here is kind of a list of all the words that you've learned. So in my mockup, I have 3 words here that they've learned. I've got it set to about 180 pixels tall. I'm just going to kind of like outline that with this rectangle here to start with. And I'm going to draw a little circle in here, which will be the image that kind of represents this, this particular word. Let's leave that right there for now. Then we'll put some text here. I have the words listed in a doc here. So the first one is going to be conduire, which is a French word that means to drive. Go ahead and turn this background white and turn this text dark. There we go. Now it's coming together. Perfect. And I'm going to put the definition below it. So we'll duplicate that, type the definition in here. It's a little big, so I'm going to make it a little bit smaller. And I'm going to make it a little bit lighter just to have a little bit of contrast. All right, so that's the basic outline for what I want a word to look like. I'm going to remove this border, but I want a solid line to divide all these words. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm just going to add a little hard shadow to it. So I added a shadow here. You can see it's a little bit fuzzy, and that's not what I'm going for. So I'm going to take the blur down and make sure the Y offset is just set to 1. So now it's just poking down 1 pixel, and you can see it just makes this nice hard line. And I'm going to make that a little bit lighter because that's a little bit too dark for me. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Okay, so from here, I'm going to make sure always that I have all this stuff in a group. So that's my first word, and then all I'm going to do is hold, I need to make 3 of these, so I'm going to hold Alt, and I'm going to click and drag, and that's going to duplicate these. All right, so now all I have to do from here is just start filling in these words. So I'm going to duplicate this one more time to get my 3rd word. All right, so the next word I have is la gare, which is train. It's the train station. In French. And my last word is un billet d'avion, which is a plane ticket. All right, now in order to make sure this is all lined up, all I'm going to do is grab each one of these pieces of text, make sure they're all left aligned, and I'm going to align them to left with my little alignment palette up here. All right, so there you go. That's kind of like a quick and dirty version of the word list. And all I want to do here at the bottom is just put kind of a gray. When you don't have any words left, I just want to put a little notice at the bottom that says, let's see, you'll get a new word tomorrow at X time. We'll say 11 a.m. Make this background a little bit lighter. Remove the borders there. All right. So even if they have 20 words here, when they scroll down, they're always going to see this little notice just so that they know that they're going to get another word. So the last thing I'm going to do here before I wrap up is I'm going to plug in some images to these different words here. So I've picked out a few images I have saved here. The first one is a train station. Or sorry, the first one is to drive. All I'm going to do is line this up with the circle here. I'm going to use the masking operator, which we used earlier to create the little progress bar at the top here. So I mask it so that the image only shows inside of that circle. And I resize it a bit to where I want. And there you go. So I'm going to repeat this process for the other words here. So we've got our train station here. And the image comes in pretty huge, but that's all right. All you have to do is grab it, grab the handles here, and you can resize it. I'll line it up there. We'll mask it. Grab the image there, get it to the size I want. All right, now we're going to grab the last one, which is it's actually a plane ticket, yeah. Sorry, I thought it was a train ticket for a second. I should have stuck with the train theme. That would have been cool. That's all right. All right, so I'm going to mask it in, and there you go. So there's pretty much a quick and dirty version. Now, I kind of threw this together pretty quick, and usually you're going to put a lot of time into the small details. The details are super important when it comes to UI design, but hopefully that gives you kind of an idea of the kind of work that a UI designer does, what it's like to work in the software every day. So I'm going to switch back to my camera here, just see if you guys have any questions that came in. So I'm just going to go from the top down here to answer the questions that I missed here. You need to understand the basics of graphic design to be a UI designer. The answer to that is absolutely not. Everybody has to start somewhere, and we keep that in mind when we design the course at CareerFoundry. So, you know, we try to get you in the software pretty quick just because that's the fun stuff, but we also teach UI design principles very quickly, and they're not just UI design principles, we also teach just design principles in general, which is really important stuff to know as a UI designer. So that's why we focus really heavily on that stuff in the beginning. Will you learn enough to make game UI? The course is more focused on more so application interface kind of UI, but the thing is with game design, it's actually very similar. Now the design style is a bit different because a lot of times it's a bit skeuomorphic, and skeuomorphic, you'll learn this in the UI design course, but skeuomorphic just means that the UI design tries to mimic real life. So if you imagine like something looks kind of furry or something like that, or something looks really textured like wood, that's skeuomorphic design. It's trying to mimic real life. Whereas when you're using like an application on your iPhone, usually it's just flat colored design. Or if you use Android material design is very flat. And that's kind of just a modern design trend. UI design actually used to be really skeuomorphic. But you will learn the principles that are needed to create certain types of games for sure. But the type of style, it's a much more illustrative style that you use to create games. So it's a really good skill to have to create UI design for games, is to be good at UI design and to be good at illustration as well. So I hope that answers that question. Is Sketch more of a prototyping tool? If you want to turn this UI into a working iOS app, do you transfer it to Xcode? So I kind of mentioned the software development cycle a little bit earlier. The kind of high-level 50,000-foot view is you start with the user experience design. How does a user make it through this computer system? How do I even know what to design? Then from there, you design it, you push the pixels around, just like what I did in Sketch. And then from here, I would work with a developer. And there's a lot of different ways you can do this process. I can do development myself. So personally, I would just take this and I would start doing development on it. But they are two completely different jobs. And there are usually completely different people who accomplish those jobs. But I do encourage you to learn both, because being able to communicate, as a UI designer, being able to communicate with developers and UX designers is only going to help you. Yeah, and Sketch, good point there by Hendy. Sketch does offer discounts for students at CareerFoundry. Do you think Sketch is insufficient enough to get a job? Is sufficient enough to get a job in the market? I think absolutely. And Sketch is, I mean, there's so many companies that are using Sketch now, and at a lot of companies, I've worked with companies that use both Photoshop and Sketch. Really, they're just kind of like, whatever gets the job done, that's fine. Sometimes it can be kind of annoying when one designer uses Photoshop and one designer uses Sketch, but at the end of the day, all they want is a good designer. So if you can show them that you're a good designer and you can prove that you can get the work done and make beautiful interfaces, they're going to care a lot more about that than what program you're using to accomplish that. And also, I kind of mentioned it, but Sketch is becoming extremely popular, so you're going to see it more and more and more in the workplace. Sorry, I just got a little note from Ruby coming in here. A lot of people want to know if you need to know UX design. To be a UI designer, you do not need to know UX design. As I mentioned, they are two completely different fields. We have a UX design course here at CareerFoundry, and it's separate from the UI design course, and we do that for a reason, because in today's market, usually those are hired separate, and that really is the right way to do it. The kind of team you want to work on is the kind of team that separates out these two job roles, because that's how you're going to build the most well-rounded software. That's how you're going to learn the most, is by working with these other people who have focused on user experience. But that being said, we do have a section in our UI design course that focuses on UX design, because there is some overlap there, and I think that's why the terms get lumped together so often. So it's very important to know how to communicate with UX designers. It's also important to be able to take their flowcharts and be able to tweak them, or be able to know what they even mean. So that's why we focus a little bit in the UI design course on teaching you how to prototype, teaching you what it is to be a UX designer, and some basic UX design principles. So I hope that answers that question. Let me just see if there are any other questions, and if not, then we can move on here. Okay, so I think I've answered most of the questions. Okay, so I'm seeing the question, is it essential to understand UX methodologies to be a UI designer? Is there overlap? So I hope I've answered that question. Okay, cool. All right, I'm going to jump back into my presentation here. Finish this out. So, okay, so now I want to talk a little bit about starting your career as a UI designer. I want to get a little bit into detail about this, so you guys can know what it's like to get out into the field. So, at a high level, the UI design field is extremely popular, especially nowadays, now that there's just a huge emphasis being put on good design. You pretty much have to have good design to even compete in the market nowadays, and that's really good news for UI designers. UI designers are everywhere. They are, I mean, if you ever used a car dashboard, and like the display in your car, or played a game on Xbox or on your mobile phone, you know, interacting with a website or a mobile app, this was all created by UI designers. It's usually a team of people, but the UI designers are the ones who put these pixels on the screen and decided what colors go where and things like that. So it's a hugely popular field. It's growing like crazy, and that's great for upcoming UI designers because there is absolutely no shortage of work in the UI design field. The UI design field also pays very, very well, just like a lot of tech fields. UI designers can expect to make anywhere from $50,000 a year to $100,000 a year, and that's in US dollars. And really, there's no limit. Senior designers can make even more than that, and eventually, you can work your way up to being like a UX UI design manager, and so there's really no limit to the amount of money that you can make in this field. So it's a really lucrative career path, but the caveat here is that you have to stick with it, number one, and you have to always be progressing. And I kind of mentioned this already, but if you're on a team where you feel like you're not learning anymore, or that you're the smartest guy on the team, it's probably time to reevaluate and maybe go to a new team where you are working with people that you can learn from. Because if you're not learning, you're gonna stop progressing as a UI designer. What are employers looking for? First and foremost, employers are looking for a great portfolio. And that's one of the reasons why we focus so heavily on this here at CareerFoundry, because we know that when you get into the job market, you have to have something that shows that you know how to design good UI. And this really it's not the only thing that they care about at all, but it is how you get in the door. Okay, so you still have to have a firm understanding of design principles, and you have to know how to create good design. And this is stuff we teach you in the course here at CareerFoundry. But that portfolio is key, and we make sure that you leave with a strong portfolio and understand how to keep your portfolio maintained and keep it going, because that's how you get in the door of a new UI design position. That's what makes them start to take you seriously to begin with. So we've talked a little bit about how popular the UI design field is. I want to talk a little bit about the future of the field, and it's very interesting stuff, and it's a topic I really enjoy chatting about. So things are changing extremely rapidly in the field of UI design. I've already mentioned there's a huge importance being placed on good design. Mobile phones, in a lot of ways, were kind of the start of this. Really, the iPhone and the Android phones, when they came out, they had such new and interesting, unique interactions. And from there, UI design just became like a huge focus. Now, it wasn't only that, but that was part of the catalyst that kind of like created this design-centric mentality. Now we have, wearable tech, like the Apple Watch, and there's smart jewelry now, and that whole market is picking up like crazy, and that's really good news for UI designers. We've also got virtual reality interfaces, and this is very interesting because you guys have probably seen the Oculus Rift, which was recently purchased by Facebook. You might have come across the Microsoft HoloLens, which they kind of started talking about very recently. It's not released yet, but it's basically a competitor to the Oculus Rift, and it's still very early on these technologies, but it really is going to change the way that humans interact with computers. Instead of everything being trapped in this kind of rectangular frame, instead the computer interface is going to be displayed, meshed into our world. It's going to be mixed in with what we're seeing. And it's kind of like, if you imagine when the phones first came out, people were pinching and swiping and all these really new, unique interactions that you couldn't have even thought of before you started doing it on an iPhone. Virtual reality is going to have its own whole new set of these really unique and fun interactions, new design principles, new UI design paradigms, and that is all very, very exciting stuff for UI designers, and it's very good news because that's a whole other field that's opening up, and it's going to get absolutely huge in the next 5 to 10 years. The next thing, and this one's really interesting for UI designers. Voice-guided interface, some people call it no UI, and this is an interface that is completely guided by your voice. You can think like Apple Siri, the evolution of Apple Siri. And this kind of scares UI designers, and a lot of people are writing blog posts just kind of explaining how the UI design profession might disappear and things like that. But the reality is UI designers shouldn't be scared of this at all, because all it is an evolution of human-computer interaction. And we're not always going to be talking into our wrist, right? That's just kind of a little stopgap for what's going to come. Eventually, virtual reality and voice-guided interfaces are all going to mix together, and it's all kind of going to be this this new way that we interact with computers. We're not going to be doing it on the screen or doing it on our wrist. We're just going to be doing it in the air. It's going to be overlaid on our reality. So you're still going to be talking to the computer quite a bit, but you're also going to be using your hands. It's the same way you use your hands in real life, right? That's not going to change, and someone has to be there to design these new interfaces. And the reality is this isn't going to be an overnight change. This is going to be very gradual, but like I mentioned, it all comes down to designers keeping up with the trends and making sure that they're trying new things and that they're learning from others, because that's how you're going to make sure that you're still relevant when all these new technologies come out. For example, when the Apple Watch, something new like the Apple Watch comes out, the first thing a designer should do is say, all right, I'm going to download the user interface kit and I'm going to start making some Apple Watch UI. That's how, even if the device doesn't pick up, it doesn't matter. This is just how you stay relevant. So I always encourage UI designers to jump on the new trends and try some things out so that you can stay relevant. It's funny though, it might be in the future, like right now you go into a coffee shop and everyone's got their laptop out and they're all pecking away at their keyboards. In the future, it's going to be a lot different. You know, instead of everyone typing away, people are going to be waving their arms around and pinching in the air and stuff like that. It's probably going to look a little bit silly, but that's how it's going to be in the future. And there's going to be a huge opportunity for UI designers to create those interactions and interfaces. So what's the life of a UI designer like? What do they do all day? UI designers are going to spend a lot of time working with others. So it's a very collaborative field, and it's very critique heavy, and that's why in the course at CareerFoundry we talk a lot about critique, and we talk a lot about what it takes to give out good critique and take good critique, and this is extremely important because it is a very collaborative field. UI designers will be working with product managers, UX designers, other UI designers. I've even had to work directly with sales and directly with marketing in the past. So it really touches all aspects of the business. So you can expect it to be very collaborative and to be working with a lot of other people. We also focus on how to give, so I mentioned we focus on how to give critique. This is hugely important, and that's why we kind of worked it into the UI design course here at CareerFoundry, because when you enter the job market, we want you to be able to give and take critique successfully and be able to work with all these other people that you need to work with in order to create great designs. The types of things that you'll work on as a UI designer, you'll spend a lot of time doing wireframes and mood boards and color palettes and things like that, but the bulk of your time is going to be spent in the software actually designing the user interfaces. And I jumped into Sketch a little bit earlier. That's a bit of a taste of what UI designers do all day. It's a very artistic field, but it's also analytical, and that's why it's a perfect balance for certain types of people. And it can be a very, very great creative outlet. It is for me. You know, sometimes I'll jump in the software, I'll be pushing pixels around for 2 hours, and it'll feel like 20 minutes. You know, and that's usually a good sign that you're on the right path with your career, right? Another thing is keeping up with design trends, and I've kind of mentioned this off and on through my presentation. This is extremely important because this is how you stay relevant. When I would go into my job every day when I worked in an office, I would pull up Google Reader and I'd look through my subscriptions of things like UX Booth, other UI design blogs, Smashing Magazine, and you want to always stay on top of this news because you want to know the new products that are coming out that you might have to build for. For example, the Oculus Rift or the Apple Watch or any other wearable that might come on the market, and you want to know what's new in design. What are the new design trends? I mentioned earlier that we've made this transition from skeuomorphic UI design to kind of flat UI design, and this was not an overnight transition, and some people were kind of left in the dust because they didn't really see the change coming. So when you keep up with these design trends, it's a way to make sure that you always see these changes in the markets coming and that you can adjust for them. One of the last things I want to talk about is UI design is, since it's a technical field, as a UI designer, you can pretty much work from anywhere. Now, I mentioned how when I became a UI designer, I moved out to San Francisco to work with some of the best talent. It's just not that way anymore. You don't have to do that. There are hugely popular companies that are completely remote. Companies like Buffer, GitHub, IBM has a huge remote workforce. Huge companies are starting to embrace remote working and to take it very, very seriously. And that's a very, very good thing because that means that you can live anywhere you want, but still work for companies in San Francisco, or you can work for a company in New York, you can work for a company in London, you can work for whatever company that you like, as long as you have the design chops, right? And that's very, very great news. All you need really is a computer and the internet. I'm currently, I kind of mentioned this, but I'm currently just kind of road tripping around the United States, and I'm working while I do this. And the reason that I'm able to do that is because all I need is a laptop and good internet, and I can pretty much do this job from anywhere, and it really is true work-life freedom. So that's the long and short of it. I just want to say thanks a lot for joining. I'm going to look through the little question feed here and see if I have any other questions that I haven't gotten to. Give me just a second. Here's one question. Would you say this course is suitable if you already have UI design experience? I would say if you're looking for a very well-rounded skill set, then this course is going to be very helpful for you. We also have a section that goes into UX design, and so that's an extremely important part of part of the learning process here at CareerFoundry. We want to make sure you're well-rounded and that you know how to talk with the other designers on your team, and we want to make sure that you understand key design principles and that you leave with a good portfolio. So really, it's up to you to decide if you want to kind of go that extra level in your understanding of user interface. Then yeah, the course might still be really suitable for you. And you can head to the CareerFoundry website, careerfoundry.com, and you can read a lot about what we offer in the course, and we'll give you like the high level so you can kind of get an idea of what types of things you're going to be learning. And if it looks exciting, then it's probably a good idea for you to give it a try. So Ruby just sent a question through to me. As a UI designer, do you need to figure out how to transform your app design into an actual functioning app via coding or a coding program? I touched on this just a little bit earlier. Those are two completely different job functions. It is a good, I mean, it's good to know as much as you possibly can, right? But as a UI designer, your focus is creating beautiful interface. When it comes to making that functional, that's the job of the coder, and there's a whole range of different roles that come with that. Oh yeah, sorry guys, let me pop my video on here. All right. Yeah, so there's a whole group of roles that come with actually building the app out, and this is something you'll learn a lot about as you kind of make your way into the job market. Let's see if we have any other questions, or Ruby, you can feel free to shoot some my way if you saw some.
I haven't seen any more questions.
Yeah, I think I got to most of the ones that were in the feed.
Cool.
Cool.
Nice. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So I did see one about someone missed the first 15 minutes. There will be a recording. You can find that on our YouTube page and also our Google Plus page. And so we'll link you to that afterwards. For everyone that joined, we'll also be sending emails. So just showing you how you can get to the recording. And also, we did promise a little present for everyone that stuck around to the end. That is a discount code. So helping you get started as a UI designer with CareerFoundry, I'll give to you. So we'd love to offer you 10% off. So all you have to do is go on the careerfoundry.com and you can enroll for the course. And just on the enroll page, you can enter the discount code, which is CF Webinar. So for 10% off, just enter CF Webinar. And I think that's pretty much it we have for you today. I hope you guys learned a lot. Like I said, we'll be putting this video out on social as well, so you can share it with your friends, share it with anyone that missed it. Thank you so much for sending all your questions here. It's been great. And thank you so much for joining us, Eric.
Yeah, heck yeah. Thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun.
Cool. Well, I hope you guys had some fun too. So, yeah, so any questions that we didn't get to, we can answer for you and send it through on the event page. We're going to hopefully do a lot more of these webinars, so a shout out, and hopefully you can join us for those too. And so good night, everybody. It's great to have you on board with us, and see you next time.
See you later.